What's up, y'all? It's your girl, Asia Chanel with the Intermodal Group, and today we're going to be talking about drayage accessorial fees, so let's get straight into it. So what are accessorial fees? Accessorial fees are extra charges that trucking carriers add to cover the cost of additional services that goes beyond the normal transportation of goods. So these fees are common in the trucking and logistics industry, and they help carriers to get paid for their extra time, effort, and any additional resources that are used during a shipment. So when are accessory fees used? When you see a load posted on the load boards anywhere, you want to be able to contact the broker with the rate in mind before you reach out to them. This means having your Linehaul and accessorial list ready. And if you guys check the description box below, there's actually a link to get a free quote request template that you can download and customize at your disposal. So it will be best to have a line item breakdown of the rates that you want just in case any uncontrollable circumstances may arise. So for example, let's say that a container was posted on Load Match or any of the load boards going from Mount Pleasant, South Carolina to Gastonia, North Carolina. This is what the free template that you guys download kind of looks like. And this is what you will want to send out when your broker is asking for a quote request. So in the description box below, if you guys are looking for a specific term, there's going to be a timestamp that'll get you to the term that you're looking for. These are not all of the terms that are in drayage. Of course, there are plenty more accessorial fees that you could use, but these are the most popular and the ones that I wanted to go over today. So let's start with line haul. Line haul is the base rate amount of money that you want to move goods for your broker, freight forwarder, or shipper. So in drayage, you get this amount by calculating the total miles and multiplying it by your desired rate per mile. So for example, let's say that the Port of Norfolk to Greensboro, North Carolina is 236 miles one way. But you guys know that everything that comes out of the port, it has to go back into the port, which means that we multiply everything by 2. So 236 times 2 equals 472 total miles. If you or your carrier's desired rate per mile is $3 a mile, you would multiply the total miles by 3 to get your line haul. So 472, which is the total miles, multiplied by 3, which is the desired rate per mile, that equals 1416, and this is your line haul total. And you can feel free to round this up or down to whatever your comfort level is. Fuel surcharge. A fuel surcharge is an extra fee that is added to cover the fluctuating cost of fuel for transporting the goods. Fuel surcharge is usually determined as a percentage, which is what I like to do the most, percentage of the line haul rate, or as a per mile cost that is linked to the current average fuel prices. So for example, let's say that the line haul rate is $1,500, the current fuel price is $4 a gallon, and the fuel surcharge percentage is 15% based on a fuel surcharge table that ties to the average fuel price. So the calculation will look like this. The fuel surcharge is 15% of $1,500, which is $225. Okay, so the line haul is $1,500. The fuel surcharge is $225. Now the new total before the additional accessorial fees is $1,725 for this rate or lane. So let's talk about chassis. A chassis is a flatbed frame that is used to carry shipping containers in drayage operations to transport goods between ports and other locations. So you can obtain a chassis by renting or leasing it from the terminal, the port, or a chassis provider. And they can also be brought directly from a private seller like on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or something similar. Carriers generally charge $30 to $45 a day for a standard size chassis that carries legal weight containers. Overweight containers, however, that need a triaxle chassis, they could typically charge more at about $75 to $125 per day, depending on the port and the competitive market rates. So a little bit more on chassis. Chassis sizes are different in length depending on the size of container that your carrier is moving. So for example, A 20-foot container needs a 20-foot chassis, and a 40-foot container needs a 40-foot chassis, and so on. Most carriers get their chassis from a chassis pool, which is beneficial to them because it's like they're renting it from a chassis. They're renting a chassis from a port instead of buying one up front, which saves a little bit of money. And it also gives them access to various sizes and types depending on their port chassis availability. So I like this option. I feel like it's a lot more flexible because even if we're running on projects or no matter what, the carriers will always be able to obtain a chassis as long as their chassis pool has chassis available for them to pull. Overweight. An overweight accessorial fee is charged when a container is heavier than allowed by that state or the region. So carriers need an overweight permit per state that it's carrying the container in. So for example, if the container is overweight and it needs to go from Virginia to North Carolina, it needs to have an overweight permit for both of those states. This pricing varies depending on that state's requirements. Different size containers have different weight limits. So, for example, a 40-foot container weight limit in one state may be 44,000 pounds until it's considered to be overweight. Anything heavier than that, the carrier should charge an overweight fee as well as a triaxle chassis fee. Overweight and triaxle chassis go hand in hand. If the container is overweight, it should only be placed on a triaxle chassis, which has the ability to carry overweight containers safer than a standard size chassis. So let's tie this all together. Let's say that the line haul is $1,500. The fuel surcharge is at 15% of the line haul, which gives us $225. The triaxle chassis is $75 a day for 2 days. And the overweight fee, we're going to charge them $200. So if approved, the total rate for this will be $2,075. But do you see how you can continue to add on fees? And it shouldn't just be an all-in rate because there are different things that could happen or different things that come up, which makes it crucial for you guys to use accessorial fees to your benefit when you're doing drayage operations. So carriers typically charge $100 to $200 for an overweight fee because of the fuel and permits that goes into carrying this container type. This price can vary depending on the state and the carrier's preferences. Detention. Detention happens when a driver has to wait too long at a shipper or receiver to load or unload. So most companies allow a certain amount of free time, usually about 2 hours, but if it takes longer than that for the receiver or the shipper to load the container or unload the container, the shipper or the receiver will get charged a detention fee for holding that truck up. So for example, let's say that a carrier is stuck at a facility for 4 hours in total. Those 2 hours are going to be free, but they're going to charge for those additional 2 hours for whatever their detention fee is per hour. So carriers on average can charge about $65 to $100 per hour after their first 2 hours are up. A pre-pull fee. So a pre-pull fee is a charge for picking up a container from the port and temporarily storing it at a yard instead of delivering it straight to the customer. So this $100 to $150 on average fee covers the extra step of moving the container to the storage yard and holding it there until the delivery or receiving location is ready to receive it. So storage. Storage fees are charges for keeping a container at a storage yard after it has already been pulled from the port. So step one usually looks like storage fees come into effect once the container no longer has any more free days to stay inside of the port. When this happens, carriers usually can charge anywhere from $40 to $60 per day to store the container on a storage yard. When the container needs to be pulled from the port and put on a storage yard, the carriers can also add on the pre-pull fee when doing this. So be sure to add both of those together when you are doing your quote request. So again, pre-pull fees and storage. If the container has to be stored, you should always be charging a pre-pull fee in your quote request. Okay, that was a tongue twister. Hazmat. Carriers can charge a hazmat fee when the commodity inside of the container contains hazmat materials. So this is usually known upfront when you're quoting on the containers, and only the carriers or the driver with a hazmat endorsement can move this material. Carriers can usually charge $150 to $300 to carry hazmat material, depending on the class of the material, the distance, and the distance that the container needs to go. A reefer fee. Reefer fees usually come into play when the container contains commodity in size that needs to stay at a temperature regulated level during travel. So reefer containers have a small refrigeration unit mounted on it called a genset, and you can see that here at the top left. This is meant to keep the container cooled at a certain temperature. So reefer fees can vary between $100 to $200 depending on the carrier's preferences. This fee is considered because of the fuel, the time, and the monitoring that goes into transporting a reefer container. A triaxle chassis. So a triaxle chassis is used when the carrier has to carry an overweight container, like we talked about before. Most overweight containers need to be carried on a triaxle chassis due to the weight limit on a standard chassis. So basically, a triaxle chassis is like a heavier duty chassis than a standard size chassis, which means that they can charge more because of the fuel of the container itself and because of the type of chassis that this is. So carriers on average can charge between $55 to $75 per day for access to these chassis. I did say on the other slide that it was like 75 to 125. I have seen them vary if it's depending on which port it's coming out of. Like in New York, California, they are able to charge more for triaxle chassis. And then some of the southern eastern states that I've dealt with or dispatched for, like Virginia, South Carolina, those don't charge as much. So again, all of these prices do vary upon your carrier's preferences and what the competitive market's rates are depending on that port. A residential fee. So a residential fee is an additional fee that is charged by the carriers when delivering or picking up containers at a residential location instead of a warehouse or a commercial facility. Carriers on average can charge between $100 to $200 per pickup or delivery for this type of service. Port congestion. Port congestion happens when the ports are overloaded with trucks, ships, and just a lot of movement inside the port, which is causing a significant delay, a lot longer than the normal operations. So carriers can charge a port congestion fee based on the time, energy, and fuel that is being used from them going inside of the port to pull a container out or to bring a container in. Port congestion fees often range from $100 to $350 per container. However, in extreme cases of severe congestion, fees could go higher. Excuse me. So fees can be higher in areas with notorious congestion, such as the ports of LA, Long Beach, or New York and New Jersey. Layover. A layover refers to when a driver is delayed and cannot continue their journey due to unforeseen circumstances, such as waiting for a load, missed appointments, or issues at the pickup or delivery location. During a layover, the driver often has to stay overnight or longer, resulting in lost time, fuel, and potential earnings. Carriers may charge a layover fee to compensate for the driver's time, such as delays. These fees can range from $150 to $500 a day, depending on the situation and the carrier's policy. A dry run. A dry run in the trucking and logistics industry happens when a truck driver is dispatched to a pickup location, but for some reason the load isn't ready and cannot be picked up. Essentially, the trip is wasted because the driver cannot complete the job as planned. So carriers can charge a dry run fee or a truck order not used fee to cover the cost of the driver's time, fuel, and equipment usage. This fee typically ranges from $150 to $400 or a percentage like 50% to 100%, depending on the carrier's preferences and the distance that is traveled. So there are some things to keep in mind. All of these rates are based on an average of what I've seen while working with carriers, and these rates can also vary depending on the carrier's location, the preferences, and the port. So if you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like and subscribe for more. Also, be sure to let me know what you think about this video in the comments, and also what you guys are interested in learning about, so I can keep making more educational videos for you guys. Check out the link in the description box below if you're interested in downloading a free quote request template to send out to your brokers, carriers, freight forwarders, or shippers when bidding on new lanes. Thanks for watching this video. You can stay connected with us by subscribing, of course, and you can also follow us on social media on Instagram at the Intermodal Group for more tips, insights about drayage and logistics. I will see you in the next video.